This is Talent Matters podcast. I'm Donal O'Donoghue. The podcast is sponsored by Sanderson, and I'm delighted to be joined by Síle Uí Chiaráin. How are you, Síle?
Táime ag ceart. It is amazing to be here.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant to have you here. We met when I was a guest on your podcast recently, and you promised me that you would return the favour by guesting on Talent Matters, and here you are. So thank you so much for coming in.
My pleasure.
So tell us a little bit, for anybody that's not familiar with you. You've had a very interesting life and career. So tell us a little bit about your background. How would you describe yourself?
How would I describe myself as opposed to describing my background? And they're probably slightly different. So my background and my backstory is that I grew up in Dundalk, County Louth, and I trained as a teacher in the 80s, not today or yesterday. I spent 30 glorious years in education and absolutely loved it. Retired just as COVID was kicking in, and we had taught from home for a while, and then we were all going back into the classroom and things were changing. But I had retrained as a psychotherapist. So there was kind of no ambulance chasing involved. It was an ideal time to retire. I could because I had passed 50. So once you pass 50, you can. It's very punitive on the old pension. If you're checking in with the financial officer, it's not a wise thing to do in one way, but it felt like a very right thing to do. We talked on my show about resume versus legacy, and I very much thought in a heart-led way about the next chapter of my life when I chose to move on. So I began to practice full-time. And I absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved working in psychotherapy. I moved in then to do some psychotherapy-led leadership and executive coaching, loving it. And I got a chance to act. So I brought in a whole new range of skills and talents that I didn't know I had, but they can't have been buried too deep inside me, because as soon as I got a chance, I jumped at it. Once I was free, once that, round pin was released from the round hole, I saw opportunity and I jumped at all of it. It was amazing. So I started acting on Ross Naroon. I got into a couple of films, English language and Irish language. Absolutely loved it. And I've continued to grow from that perspective. That was my launch pad. And I'm broadening my horizons ever since. I started the Síle Show on the 12th of August last year.
And it's flying. You've had brilliant people on. And what I love about your podcast is that you marry all the different layers together. So you're talking to people about their life and their careers and the moments that have challenged them or the moments that make them, and then you tie in some of the theory behind it. I noticed you'll do that. Somebody will describe something and you'll say, oh, well, that's, this element of your personality or that element of your personality. And I love that, the way you kind of tie all the different strands together.
Thank you very much. That is the aim, and it happens very seamlessly. And I suppose I pride myself on the ideology behind the show being that it's ethical story stewardship with agency. And that is because I have this range of skills in my backstory. And I suppose then, because you had probably alluded to describe who you are, describe your backstory, and they're never necessarily the same, because sometimes your backstory is connected to your biology of the time and even your biography. But as you do different things, you change your biography, and so you change your biology. So even the person that I was all of those years ago is not even recognisable as the person that I am today. But it took everything that I went through to be the person I am today. And I think on the Síle Show, I get a chance in that space with fullness of heart to chat with people about their story in that same way. And I consider it a gift. I hold people's heart in my hands that space. And I love that. It is a gift.
And the thing that I think you're really good at doing, which is difficult to do when you're hosting a podcast, is actually listening to what the person is saying in the moment and analysing it and then looking at it through a different lens and feeding back a different perspective that maybe they haven't seen, which is not easy to do, as anybody that's involved in podcasting will tell you. But what I would love to do in terms of context is go back to your early days. Like, what were you like as a kid? What were you into as a kid? Because it's interesting to trace the path that you've gone down.
It is, Donal. Thank you very much for the chance to explore that. And thank you for your kind words as well about reflective listening. I think it's a hugely important part of media. In a role like this, you know, we have to do kind of the work on ourselves, on our shadow selves to some extent, to be able to be public facing. Because I think if you're going to be front facing and you bring your, as we say in psychotherapy, your animals into the room or your own nominalizations into the room, you could, as you say, not be in the moment with your guest. You could be hearing what they're saying through your own nervous system. So it's lovely to have done the work in the background. And perfect segue then to mention that I was a really, really anxious child, like cripplingly anxious. And sad a lot of the time. I've in more recent years, I've worked, well, when I say recent years, I mean probably maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when I went into psychotherapy at the very beginning, I realised that research was me search. And that as I was trawling through the books to find the book that would lead me to whatever answer I was trying to find, I realised, oh, it's time to retrain. There's a lot in here that I need to unpick and unpack. And it was certainly to have another string to my bow in my career, and because I was chasing something else. But it was also to understand my hurt heart. And I couldn't understand necessarily why I had that. I thought that I had a relatively safe childhood. I understand now, for a myriad of other reasons that have come to light more laterally, that it probably wasn't very psychologically safe. And that's with no disrespect or derogatory intention towards anybody that was in my younger life. But I understand things differently now, and I see things through a different lens. And it helps me to understand that I was like cripplingly anxious. And I call it now a melancholy, and that I'm a recovering melancholic. That's my language for more recent times in my life and how I get to do what I do without nerves, thankfully. I have due levels of mild anxiety, which helps me to show how invested I am in anything. But that's as far as it goes, you know.
It's remarkable, because I never would have seen that from how you present today. Like, you know, it is remarkable, isn't it? And in terms of interest and aptitude as a child?
Loved school. I would have been, I'm grateful to say that I enjoyed school, and I sailed through school academically. I would have done very well. I always achieved whatever it is I wanted to achieve. Academically, no problem. And I enjoyed working with people as well, even at that young stage. I always thought I'd like to do law, and that was the intent. And oddly and interestingly, I was telling you, my husband came up with me today. We decided to have a date day because things went awry in terms of the planning, as you know.
All my fault. And apologies to you both for that.
No, never. I love that. I love that. I find those things really interesting. I just take a breath and I say, oh, interesting universe. So what did you have in mind? This is what I thought I was doing. You clearly have a different idea. And I just show up to it in innocence, and I love it. And I stay, again, with that lovely open mind, open heart. And I'm more intrigued than ever and quite tickled pink to see what's coming next. So we planned then a lovely date evening, or date day, if you like. And that's not how it would have happened, because if I was going to head off earlier, I would have made my own way. And in the end, we came together and it was lovely. So my husband has retrained as a barrister in recent years. He's very nearly the big 6-0. So I think it's a huge achievement to decide to do that.
It is incredible.
It's wonderful. And he's actually meeting one of his college mates there now today, another guy who retired from Síle Show, and he's done the same thing again. A great achievement.
And that's so valuable,
yes,
to have barristers that have that experience from other careers, and that bit of maturity, having the empathy for seeing people going through the different challenges that they may have to advocate for.
Now, it's his pal that has retired from An Garda Síochána, and Martin himself is in health and safety and has been in health and safety all of his working life, really. So, yeah, lovely. And I, oddly, was going to do law. That was the trajectory at the time, and it would have been everything on CAO and UCA, and like it was, gosh, education was a totally different model in those days. And then at the very last minute, I got what had previously been called the call to training. I don't know if you've ever heard that. So I got my opportunity to do an interview in Pat's, and it was a music interview, a singing interview, and I think you had to pass on your points. Was there another part? There was a competency level. I just can't recall what it was. But I did it, and I just loved the place and the space. And I, very last minute, did a 360. And I decided, do you know what? I think I'll do primary school teaching. And it wasn't that it was my second best. It just hadn't really come into my radar because I was focused on doing law. And that's what I decided to do then. I went to Pat's and loved my teacher training, loved the experience, and I loved teaching, fell in love with education. I love children, I love people. And I was learning through the children and the families that were coming into my classroom every day and whose lives I got to experience through their little children. And very often, you know, the parents, the quickest way to a mammy's heart is through her child, and to a daddy's heart, I'm sure, as well. And I realised over the years, gosh, there's so much more I'd love to understand about what's going on for people. And I had still got a lot of stuff in my own shadow that I didn't realise, but I was addressing, I think, a need more superficially in being there for people. And then in the end, I realised, no, this is more acute. I need to do a little bit more work on this. And I did. And it helped me then to get into the afternoon of my life, as I say, in psychotherapy and acting and storytelling in all the shapes and forms. So to speak to your question regarding what type of person was I, what was my aptitude was just... And I'm not blowing wind of my own horn here now, but I was just kind of an ordinary good girl. I tried to stay out of trouble, and I was the best that I could be. My world was very small. I wouldn't have been the most popular person in the room because I wasn't the coolest person in the room. I was very anxious, and anxiety kept me small. You know, some of the things that I absolutely loved to do were to go to the Gaeltacht. So went off up to Ranafast, learned my Irish, fell in love with...
Was Irish spoken in the home?
No, not at all. Not at all. But
and you're fluent?
I am.
Beautiful.
I really am, yes.
Fantastic.
And I say that, you know, not in any cocky way. I say, and I really am, because I'm so excited to share with you that, yes, I am. And it's like if somebody is born able to sing or somebody's born able to draw, and they don't realise that, because we all come into the world as overwired spud bugs. And until somebody helps us to fire and wire the neural pathways, we don't necessarily know. And if you're lucky enough to be born into a world where you get taken to art lessons or horse riding lessons or, you know, whistle lessons or piano lessons, you can grow that skill accordingly. But, you know, your podcast is Talent Matters. Talent and skill and, you know, honing a craft, they're related, but they're not the same.
They're not. And actually, it's called Talent Matters, but actually the premise of it is often that talent matters less than your application and your skills and your work ethic and your grit.
Yeah.
Because talent, the predisposition towards being good at something, is seldom the thing that gets you the farthest. But I love that that you developed fluency through going to the Gaeltacht, because I explained to you, I've got family in Connemara who would have been raised through the Irish language, and I've always been really jealous of that, because I would have loved to have that myself. And it's a regret that I didn't do more about it, to spend more time down there to develop the language. But I'm really pleased that the kids are showing an interest in their culture and the language. And then going back to the teaching days, one thing I want to ask you is that teaching and school has changed a huge amount from the days when we were in school. And I'm reminded of this because the principal from my primary school, the Harold Boys National School in Glasstool, I found that he put a couple of thousand photos into an online photo album because the fifth class teacher, who's now passed away, was a man called Brendan Halpin. And he loved photography, and he used to always have the camera anytime there was a sports day or special occasions. And like I presumed, like I suppose you don't think about that kind of thing when you're 8, 9, 10 years of age, that he was taking photos. But I found this kind of treasure trove, like a time capsule of these thousands of photos from the 70s, 80s and 90s, like a window back to different days. And I'm actually going to share them on my social media for other people that were in that school to get a snapshot back into how different life was and to show our kids. But that's a very long-winded way of asking you, in terms of the changes that you saw over your years in teaching, and obviously you're dealing with kids from all different backgrounds, some who have, you know, a tougher upbringing than others, some who have, more to deal with at home. And then we're also seeing, in terms of neurodiverse kids, there seems to be far more prevalent now than it was back in our day. Well, that's the view a lot of people have. And you wonder, is that true, or was it just undiagnosed, or were those kids just excluded? So talk to me about your view of education over the period of time you were in primary school as a teacher and as a deputy principal.
Yeah, so things changed a lot in those 3 decades, for sure. Apart from anything else, the model that I trained in was very analogue. And I have funny stories about doing my minhuirsk and my mórhuirsk, which is where the kegara comes in to inspect you, teaching. And I have very funny stories with that, which I won't tell on the podcast. Some of it requires vernacular, a la Dundalk, County Louth, Ireland, and this would not be the place for it. But it was very analogue. You had a large folder on the desk at the back of the class with the Kigara, who watched over his glasses and read your folder and watched over his glasses throughout the day. And you passed or you didn't pass more or less on the day. Whereas now everything is so smart. You've got your interactive whiteboards. You've information at the touch of a button. As you know, we researched everything. You'd be using Children's Encyclopedia and Family Encyclopedia to do a lot of your research. You'd be going to the library. You'd be making your own charts and posters on the ground. So from that perspective, everything changed. The training was good. I want to say hats off to Department of Education. I feel the training was good. I feel like saying that. I feel like if you invested in it and showed up to it with an open mind and an open heart, that we were given every opportunity then to, explore it further ourselves. And I do feel that we were ready and we were entrusted to some extent with an autonomy within the profession. Things changed exactly as you say in terms of our human resources, our beautiful little children. The world changed. And that was, for me, the biggest change I experienced. The children I would have taught in 1988 and onwards were very different. You could have a classroom of children and you'd never need to project your voice. You would never, there was no such thing. Thankfully, we were way past corporal punishment and all of those things. But, there was a discipline for learning type of attitude where you had lovely language to help the children to be the best they could be. And they would just respond at that level. There was no such thing as an SNA in a classroom that I recall.
That's a huge change, isn't it?
Yeah. And I don't really remember there being a huge need for that. And that's not to suggest that there weren't children with additional needs. I don't hugely remember that in my early days of teaching. You were very much the manager in your own classroom. You would be the only person there. And there was a lovely open door teaching method going on. It was written very innocuously into the curriculum of any school. I felt that we would help each other out. But apart from that, you were the manager of your own space. You kept your own notes, and they were very much your notes. And at the end of the year, you'd file them away, and you maybe would give them to somebody if they wanted them by way of reference point, but they weren't on a central system and it was all very analogue. You would write out the school reports and you would really sit and chat with the mummies and daddies at the parent-teacher meetings. Things have become faster, like everything in our world, Donal. We're consuming so much information. It's at such a speed. We weren't intended to be so connected as we are nowadays. And I think it has changed the children.
It has. And one of the things, like I touched on my national school, we had, I would think, a healthy amount of fear as children. Because in the boys' school, we had, I think they were combined classes, like first and second class, second and third. But in fourth and fifth, you had Mr. Halpin, and in fifth and sixth, you had Mr. Maguire. And we were past the days of corporal punishment, but we were afraid of them. We respected them. The standard of education was very good, I'd have to say. And people that I know that were, in my class, the year ahead, a year behind, have all gone on to do really great things. And I put a lot of that down to the really solid foundation we had in that school. But there was a healthy amount of respect and there was a healthy amount of fear. And I just wonder for people, like my niece is a teacher. She's just done her master's in Edinburgh. And I hear from different people in the profession how difficult it is to manage all the personalities in a class now where there isn't that level of fear or that level of respect. Like I can't imagine how challenging that must be to be in some of the more challenging schools.
Yeah, I really identify with that. It is, as you say, a challenge. I can only suggest that teachers are all really well trained and then they bring to the space who they are as a person. And when it's a heart-led profession for the person, when they like what they're doing, they will do some boots on the ground learning, something that the curriculum will not have included when they were in their training college. And hopefully they'll be supported by the school that they're in, and hopefully there'll be a mission statement that they can rise to and believe in, and a vision that matches their own value system. And all of those things innocuously help you to show up every day and shore up what's needed to get through the day, not just bringing all of the little children on to the best of their ability. And it's a very diverse world we live in, but also that you can love your job, because that's the longevity piece. I think you guys actually, congratulations, Segway, you guys won, or you're up for an award.
Yeah, we've won a few, and we're shortlisted for some recently. But
so congratulations for the social impact piece. I think speaks nicely to what we're talking about here. If you look at, we chatted about internal EBITDA, which is very much a Síleism, and it's easy to grow, to have a look at the bottom line financially in any business. I don't think that that's the longevity piece, though, in a business. I think if you look at internal EBITDA, checking in with the culture, checking in with how people are feeling, the meeting of the basic emotional needs in a company, I think you're looking at the sustainability of the company, and profitability and productivity looks after itself. And equally in a school, I think if teachers feel their needs are met, like the internal customer service, if you like, of a school starts in the staff room, because what happens in the staff room is repeated in the classroom. And I think all of that is very real and important to say when you ask that really pertinent question, because all of us are putting our children into schools, and teachers are then in loco parentis, and we hope that they have the wherewithal in their capacity and their spare capacity to look after our kids, educate them, but I think more than anything, mind them suitably, mind them. I do want to say that quite consciously, mind them, and point out to us if there's anything that you feel as a teacher we maybe wouldn't see at home, or if they're being marginalised in any way in school, let us know so that we can support the school supporting them. And
that's one of the big challenges, isn't it? Yeah. And bullying is huge, both at primary and secondary school level. And that's a really challenging thing for the schools to deal with, for the families to deal with, particularly for the kids, the students to deal with.
Yeah. And a lot of children nowadays, when they hit their teens, and I think COVID was really hard for kids as well, kids that have come through COVID and whatever age they were at in their teens or late teens, young adult years, during COVID, it has had an effect on their development. It has definitely delayed their development socially to some extent. And a lot of children just found they couldn't face school after COVID, and parents are having to try and come up with something very creative to get them that exit exam that they need. And it's difficult, because then if they don't fix that, and if they don't repair what really hurt them, work out what really hurt them, they'll bleed out on people that didn't cut them when they move on into their jobs, or maybe fall out with their families, and it goes with them until they fix it.
Yeah, and the other thing that is kind of tricky with this, I think with this generation, and I'd love to know your view on it, because I've talked a little bit before about the idea of gentle parenting or helicopter parenting, and like a lot of the resilience we develop is from finding our own solutions and almost, figuring our way through challenges and toughing it out. And I think the generations that have gone before that obviously dealt with bullying or dealt with being marginalised in different areas had to kind of figure their own way through it to an extent. And then this generation, it's like, what's that expression, hard times create tough people create good times create weak people. I'm sure I've said that all wrong, but like, isn't there something in that as well, that we're so all over everything that our kids are doing that we're almost taking away their ability to figure it out for themselves and to build their resilience and to fight their own battles?
Yeah. What does gentle parenting mean to you? How do you interpret gentle parenting?
Yeah, I think it is probably, I suppose I come from a generation where there was no participation medals, that you went to your football or your boxing or whatever, dancing or whatever you were into, and you practiced and you did your best, and somebody got first, second and third, and some people didn't get anything. And if you didn't win, you just were motivated to try harder the next time. And I think the generation of the last 10 years are, they get participation medals and they're happy with that. And I know that's a huge generalization, but I think it speaks to something that I see happen quite a lot in sometimes in education, in sport and business. And to me, it is sometimes a lack of consequences. There have to be consequences for poor behavior or for a lack of effort or for breaking the rules when the rules are there for a good reason. And I suppose I see gentle parenting, rightly or wrongly, as maybe a more soft approach with less consequences.
Yeah, not putting in the safe consequences. I would agree. I would agree with that. That
What's
probably,
how would you
yeah,
define?
that's
You'll
it.
have a better definition than
well,
me,
you know,
definitely.
and that's in and around where I would consider gentle parenting to be, where, you know, rightly or wrongly, that rather than preparing the child for the path, you're preparing the path for the child.
That's a
And
nice way of putting it.
it's leaving the children then without the safe consequences. And I think it disables them to some extent. Of course, you know, you can't see what's on the label when you're in the jar. If you're rearing your child and they're rearing up and being difficult, a lot of it can be to do with pride as well in the case of parents. And, you know, I say this in total support of parents. I advocate for parents and children, you know, who are doing their very best with the wisdom and knowledge they have at the time.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the gentle parenting might be seen in certain socioeconomic spaces, and then I think an equivalent is seen in other socioeconomic places. I think where, you know, people would jump up on a shovel over a ditch and ate you for, you know, I don't think that's gentle parenting.
Yeah.
I think that's a different thing.
Yeah.
But I
and
think
the balance is somewhere
yes.
in the middle, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I know somebody, for example, that is a smart person, a hardworking person, and who would have a diagnosis for being on the spectrum. And I was having a conversation with them about, you know, growing up as a child. And I was like, well, you know, all the outbursts. And I was like, how much of that is, you know, the diagnosis and how much of that throwing tantrums? And they're like, yeah, it's a bit of both. You know, but I think with, you know, there's so many labels today, and I think everybody wants to be correct and supportive. And it's hard to draw the line between, and then that transfers from the home or the school to the workplace, because we've got diverse workplaces, we've got autism friendly workplaces, but there's still workplaces, and there still needs to be a line between, you know, creating an environment that somebody can thrive in and adapting it so that it suits their way of working. But there also has to be an adherence to the norms and to the culture and to, I suppose, to, like, a workplace is a community, and we've all got to be good corporate citizens, if you like. Yeah. So it's tricky.
Yeah, and tricky is the word. It is, and we just have to, I don't think there's any one way. I think situations are bespoke to each other, or bespoke to themselves. I don't think they're bespoke to each other, sorry. And because I think that if we drew a blanket agreement on how we would handle that, there would be nothing diverse about it. We wouldn't be, you know, you can't sit in deference and just decide, oh, well, that person has a diagnosis of whatever, so they can do their own thing. That's not how it works. It doesn't grow them either. That said, it's not we're not God in employment as the, you know, a department head or CEO. We're not God. But we are running a business, and somebody is employed to do a job with certain conditions. Now, what I do feel is really important, and I've had the great pleasure of working with companies to improve this practice, is to go back and look at the meeting of the basic emotional needs. Very often people can be misplaced within a company, and in that place they may not thrive, but somewhere else in the company,
absolutely,
they may thrive and have a lot more to give. And then the balance of power shifts very beautifully, because the people who facilitated that, if they were locking down and couldn't see that, you know, and they get helped to see it, I think what happens is there's a great sense of efficacy in the management of people within the company. So top down, there's a change that's positive and pleasant, and then bottom up, there's a change that's positive and pleasant. And I think all of that is the beauty of the culture being organic and live and alive, as opposed to stagnant and workman rules, and, you know,
definitely.
And I think that's probably the nuance of the changing face of society.
Yeah, like, we've come from the days where the interview started with judging somebody on the quality of their handshake and their eye contact, which, as you would appreciate, somebody that has a diagnosis of an ASD diagnosis may not be great at, but they might be fantastic at pattern recognition. They could be the best software developer, but just maybe not be comfortable in some of the environments that you end up in terms of meetings when you're in a business. But yeah, interesting times. So what I'd love to go into next is a little bit about the pivot. So you touched on it in your opening. I wonder, did you get to a point where working in education, that it was it not challenging enough for you? Because you've obviously got lots of interests and a great brain and lots of aptitude. So did it get to the stage where you just wanted something new or something more challenging, or was it the hunger for learning? Like, what motivated you to go in the direction you went?
Yeah, it was a myriad of things. It was quite a menagerie, a beautiful menagerie at the time, because I had retrained as a psychotherapist, and that was very it was very self-driven, really. When it started quite innocuously. I actually did a scholarship for Psychology College Ireland 2 or 3 years previously. I always think the cooperative components of the universe are lined up for all of us. We just have to get out of our own way. So clearly I was putting it out there to the universe that I would get some answers from myself. And I wasn't getting a direct answer back, but I was getting things that were lining up for me that I was exploring further. So I did a scholarship for Psychology College Ireland, and I didn't get it. I was unsuccessful, and I was devastated. I couldn't believe it, because, even when I did the BER rating on my house, I was highly offended that it wasn't an A, even though I knew it couldn't be. So I was like, what? I didn't get the scholarship. You really need to go back and check those grades. But anyway, I was pipped at the post. I got a lovely letter, and I was invited to the closing ceremony, which I didn't go to. Not that I was chewing down on the sour grapes, but I just thought, well, not for me. So I sat with the thought for a while, and I looked into various other options. I felt I couldn't afford to go back to college if I didn't get the scholarship. I had decided. I arrived with that nominalisation, if you like. It wasn't the right time. My children were at school. One was going to be going on to college. And I just thought, I can't. But it was calling me. And anything that's appetitive like that is worth exploring. So I found a way that I could do it piecemeal at that stage. And as I say, then it began to put a stitch in my own tattered heart that I didn't really needed so much work. So I was involving at that level, and very gracious to be there, to be understanding things that I never understood before, how much work I needed to do on some things. And then at the same time, so you bootstrap on another qualification, and even though it's not necessarily for the place that you're in, I had always wanted to understand children and families better, so all of a sudden I did. So I could see the benefit. It was like cherry on top. Oh my goodness, this is amazing. So I had lovely language to help people to understand things that I might previously have been, making reference to theory I had read, but I didn't believe in myself. So by doing the course, I had like a borrowed belief in me that I knew would kick in when I got my qualification, like in a real way. So I loved all of that. All of that was teeing me up again. I couldn't see it very clearly, but when I look back, I can see, gosh, it was there were touch points along the way that were beautifully placed for me, and I'm very grateful for that. So then I had been deputy principal of a small senior school, which was going to amalgamate. And in the amalgamation, I was myself and the deputy principal of the junior school were the only two that were qualified to apply. And the other principal was more senior than I. Now, I had a different education background, and all of that would be taken into account. But it just felt very that lovely lady actually had taught me in primary school, because I had gone to that school myself.
That's incredible,
yeah,
isn't it?
It was a lovely story. And for that and other reasons, it felt, even if it wasn't where I wanted my career to go, it felt natural to sit back and just not apply. Now, I could say other things, but that's all I'm going to say for now. It felt natural not to apply. It was only going to be she and I. She had a further maybe 5 years in her career. She was, a number of years my senior. And I suppose very quietly, I just felt, well, even if it's not now, if it's meant to be, it'll happen at some later stage. It just didn't feel, I didn't want to put my sleeves up and go into that particular space of competition. It didn't feel right to do it. So the legacy piece again, and the kind of the social impact piece. So I didn't, and then I had an opportunity to apply for principalship elsewhere, and I didn't even get an interview.
Oh, wow.
I know. That was a huge thing, Donal. That was so huge. There was something, there was definitely a block in the operating system there. Uncanny. I didn't even get, thank you, you've applied. And like, an application for principalship is a huge deal. It's, it's not for the faint-hearted. It's a big deal. And it was a big family decision as well to decide to go for that. Anyway, that didn't happen. I hadn't gone for principalship or for deputy principalship of the amalgamated school. And so very gently, the universe was whispering something else. Other options, Síle. That wasn't for you. You know, that's not how it happened. And there was a lot of, there were politics at the time that I was very averse to as well in education, in the space that I was working in education. Again, not anything I wanted to take on. That's not how I work. So it just felt very natural to move sideways and to go into psychotherapy that I was prepared for and ready for when COVID happened and everybody needed a psychotherapist, particularly a psychotherapist with a background in education. So I'm going to say I got, you know, like the king's chair you used to give each other when you were kids, like your friends would hold hands and lift you. I felt I was lifted into it, levitated into it, and I've never looked back. I love it.
Amazing. And then the acting thing, how did that come up? Like, did you do like amateur dramatics all the way through, or where did that come from?
Donal, nothing. But my eldest son is an actor. He's amazing. Sean O'Cairns. He lives in London, and he's the real deal. Amazing. And we're funny people. We love the crack, and we love accents and mimicry, and we're storytellers too. We're serious about our storytelling, and we're light-hearted about our storytelling. Everything in the right time, place, and sequence. So I got an opportunity to do an audition, which I did. I got a role in Russ na Rún, and I literally cut my teeth in the best place in the world. I was in Spiddal. And I have a lovely, we can talk again about my backstory there. I have a beautiful...
Is that shot in TG Cahir in Spiddal, is it?
It's not out as far as TG Cahir.
Okay.
It's in Spiddal, which would be just after kind of Knocknacarra, Furbo type thing. And then you'd go much further out to TG Cahir. But I loved that. And then I got other filming opportunities, which were fabulous. So I've had the best time.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
So in terms of, I'm going to turn a question on you that you asked me when I was on your brilliant Síle show. When you look at it all, you look at career, you look at family and life, what is the legacy piece for you? How would you want to be remembered by your nearest and dearest?
Yeah, how would I want to be remembered anyway? And then as well as that, by my nearest and dearest. So I've nuanced in our chat today that I have had big learnings, more recently huge learnings. And for me, my bumper sticker everywhere is love is the answer. I have experienced loss that was life-changing, and I'm going to say life-giving at the same time. So the legacy piece for me is to love with all my heart. If I can't forgive things, which when you have lessons to learn in life, sometimes you can't forgive. The forgiveness presumes that there's something to forgive, which is a bit of a battle in the undercarriage, which is not necessarily healthy, and you don't necessarily have the conversation with the individual or individuals involved. So it can be, I think, a little bit insidious, and it can hold you back. So if I can't do the forgiveness, I jump straight to compassion, and in that space of compassion, that lovely frequency, it allows me to love me more and be gentle with me, and then from that place I can love everybody that's important to me. And it's not just my nearest and dearest. I just want to love everybody, and I'm not being silly when I say that. I really do. I just want to be in a place, and I can turn my centre away. It's a lovely practice that I've managed over the years. If I'm in a space where I'm not respected, I don't have to vote with my feet. I can very gently turn my centre away. I can be physically present, and it doesn't do damage now, to all intents and purposes. I mean, there are exceptions. I'm human. But I can ground quite gently and turn my centre away. So the legacy piece for me is to continue everything I do through a lens of and with a focus of love.
And I want to talk a little bit about the podcast, because your podcast is different. What I love about it, and I touched on this in the opening, is that how do you describe it? It's like story stewardship.
Yeah.
How would you, for somebody that hasn't heard the Síle show yet, which I recommend they do, tune into, tell me about the premise and the style.
Thank you. Thank you very much for giving me the chance to do that. And thank you for your kind words. I love the show. I'm very invested in it as a model as well. So the story stewardship I want it to be ethical story stewardship with agency. In other words, I don't want to do clickbait. I don't want to farm for a story that's going to get me the following. Now, I would love the following, and it's not easy to get it. And I would love the recognition for the show and for myself. It's a career move as well. I would love to be in media to a greater extent. I would love to be earning money in media, which I'm not on the show. Where I'm self-funding at the moment, and it matters that much to me that I will continue to do that until it opens a door into something that serves both needs. But more importantly than anything, I really genuinely, and this, it hooks back into what I said about my life lessons, and they've been beautifully acute. I'm going to put it that way because I'm beautifully unfinished. I have so much more work to do inside out, and I'm here to do that. I'm here for that, as the kids say. I'm so here for that. So the show is story stewardship, because if you arrive to my show, as you very graciously did, you're going to share, because we're going to look at each other. Our nervous systems are going to sync, and if you're in authenticity and integrity, and if I'm in authenticity and integrity, that's the only AI in the space at the time. And it's, to me, the only AI that matters, because your nervous system will trust me to whatever extent it does, and mine will trust you, and you will entrust your story to me, even though we're public facing. Now, we could edit if we like, but that's not what it's about. We're human beings. It's about me being gifted that moment in time in your life where I get to steward your story. I take it where I choose to take it. So if I'm ethical about that, I'm not going to ask you anything that might, garner some sensational response in media. That's not how I need to get my following. I'll sit patiently with your story, and I'll take it to where we can take it in the space in a way that'll grow you, grow me, grow the show, and be helpful to other people. So, like I would suggest in business, in service leadership, that's the longevity piece. And the show for me is that it will stand the test of time. Beautiful people have crossed our threshold and shared their stories. And the universe is bringing us people who have something really quality to share in terms of content. But everybody turns that little corner gently with me. And I feel so honoured to be in that space. And they share that little piece that's that little bit private, but it's so real, so true, so undisputable, and so important, because it gives other people the permission then to see things through that lens.
Yeah. Well, you're flying. You're in the top percentage now, because what do they say? Most podcasts don't get past 10 or 20 episodes or something. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's lower single digits that pass 30 episodes, and you're into your 30s now as a podcaster.
We are.
Very
And people are looking for interviews now, which is fantastic. That's where we wanted it to be.
Yes.
We're very happy to look for interviews. I mean, I, needless to say, do the research and the rapport building and the feedback and the posts and all the bits and pieces. And the boys are gorgeous, absolutely lovely. You've met them. They're so supportive and so lovely. And now people are looking for the Síle Show to share their story, because they've watched and listened and they feel safe. And I feel so grateful. That's the gift that I talk about. God is forever there. Now, that's not to get into a religious thing. So whatever is the God of one's own understanding is the God I reference. But that's the gift that I think it is. When somebody will come to that space with you and share their story, that's not to be taken light. It's not soft. Like culture in a company. It's no soft thing.
Yeah. And are you religious? Seeing as you mentioned it.
Seeing as we've gone there. So
religious or spiritual, or how do you look at the whole thing?
Again, when I was younger, gosh, I was so religious. I wanted to be a nun. I have so many funny stories. I have so many funny stories. I know.
That would have made for a very different podcast. The Síle Show in the habit would be...
Listen, I have the funniest of stories. We'll have to chat. That's definitely another episode. I have to tell that one. So funny. I really wanted to be a nun. Like, there are very funny stories.
I wonder, does that... Okay, putting on... Sorry to interrupt you.
No, do please.
But what you described to me in terms of how you were as a child in school, like, it's very conscientious. You use the term good girl, in terms of doing well in school, putting the head down. And then even, I suppose, you go back to Ireland of the time where the church was such a large part of education, and the church was such a large part of life and state. So I wonder, is that tied to that kind of conscientiousness and a kind of compliant style in the personality, or what?
I think
What
I
do you
think
tie
it's,
it back
yeah,
to?
I think it's like what you said earlier as well. You know, you said there were suitable levels of fear. We were past corporal punishment, there were suitable levels of fear in all of us. We lived in different times, and we responded to our environment differently because our DNA was different. I think, you know, DNA can always be repotentiated by anybody at any time, and thankfully it always has been over the years, or there wouldn't have been change at all, because everybody would be stuck in the genetic code of their parentage and their lineage, and that we're not stuck there. I think that we can repotentiate our DNA, and we are, as we respond differently to our environment all of the time. We're all changing epigenetically. So, you know, genetics will load the gun, lifestyle will pull the trigger type of thing. And we're responding differently in that way. So kids of those years, not unlike myself, I was a mercy girl. And yes, I mean, we started with a rosary and, you know, we went to mass and all of the things. So you're right, that was part of the culture. And like the culture in a company is the collective personality. So all of the individual personalities accumulated is the culture of the establishment. And that needs to be, you know, hugely disrupted, or it will disrupt. You know, regularly. I think audited regularly to change it. So at the time, we weren't really audited in that way. You were just in the school, which was a mercy school or wherever, like Louis Nuns, whatever was the circumstance, or Christian Brothers. And it was the vernacular, the language of your time, you know, your prayers and going to mass. And it was part of the good girl thing, if you like. You know, you didn't think you were particularly good. It was just, that was just the norm.
That's how it was.
It was just the norm. But not everybody wanted to be a nun. You know, and I did all of the stereotypicals of things at the time. Like I wore the pillowcase on my head and I sang into a hairbrush and all the bits. Yeah, I did all that. It's embarrassing, but it happened. But I really did think that God was calling me. And I'm not saying that now facetiously now, you know, or tongue in cheek. Like I genuinely did think. And so I would love to, I will someday tell you the funny stories there. It didn't happen anyway. I went on to become a teacher and I got married, and I don't regret not becoming a nun. But at that time, I would have gone to mass. I would have gone to, there's a novena to St. Gerard Magella in the town that I live in. I was dedicated to that and I loved it. I loved the hymns at mass. And it was a lot of the camaraderie, although you mightn't have been speaking to somebody, was that sense of connection and having a common focus. It's probably not unlike the wee county played in, and unfortunately didn't get through this weekend, Louth, but great chaps. I tip my hat to them. Great guys, got out there for their county and amazing. But when you get in behind a football team, for example, you know, you have that sense of...
It's a similar sense of community, isn't it?
That sense of community.
Togetherness.
It meets so many needs and kind of all reading off the same hymn sheet. So that was the kind of world I was reared in. And that was my faith practice of the time. It was showing up to the church and doing the very ecclesiastical thing. Then, more laterally, I'm very spiritual. And when I was a teacher as well, of course, I had a duty to go to mass and to bring the children and prepare them for sacraments. And I did that hand on heart. And of course, rearing my own children, that's how I chose to rear my children as well. Is that how I continue to live my life now? No, it's not. Have I any aversion to church or mass? Absolutely not. I'd happily go. I love sitting into a church and lighting a candle.
It's probably very similar to most people,
I think so.
The relationship that most people have. And it's kind of a sign of the times, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think from my perspective, it's definitely more about... I don't know if I'd call it... it's more about the energy. You know, I believe that if you put... you're decent to other people and you try to help other people and you put good energy or good vibes out, that you receive the same in return.
I totally agree. Donal, like actually, that's a faith practice in its own right to get to that place. And you alluded to that in our chat on the Síle Show, and it was beautiful. And you were so gentle about it. And I really felt energy move in the room when you said it. I said that to you, and it wasn't lip service, because it's readable. You know, energy is readable. It transfers and it travels. And I do believe that that's faith practice in its own right, is to just know that whatever is your vibrational offering in life at any given time, we are getting an exact match for that all the time. So if we don't like it, all we need to know is, well, that's our power, not our kryptonite, because we change it. So we check in with ourselves, audit, what are we doing? What are we putting out there? You know, what is our quiet voice inside, our inner critic saying? How are we speaking to ourselves? because that's going to be putting us in a certain place on the map of consciousness as such. And that's what we'll be offering. And the good news is that's what you're getting back, because therein lies your opportunity to change what you're putting out there. And then that will change what comes back to you. And that, if you put out kindness, kindness is what you'll get back.
Yeah, I love that. If you were talking to the people who are probably at a similar life stage to us, and they're toying with the idea of that pivot, of maybe they've been in a role for 20 or 30 years and it's no longer floating their boat, or it's no longer challenging them, or it's no longer, I suppose, when you think about the fact that we're going to live longer and work longer. But there's a bit of courage needed to retrain or to follow a different interest. What would you say to someone?
Yeah, and I work with this all the time. So in my own private practice, obviously as a psychotherapist, I work with guided imagery and reality generator and hypnosis and various things to help people to access the paradigm. So I would always say nobody is capped by capacity, they're capped by their paradigm, in other words, their belief system. So their limited or limitless thinking is all happening in the subconscious mind. And we're very suggestible in hypnosis. So when I chat with somebody who's hoping to pivot, but they don't necessarily know where they want to go and they don't really know why they want to leave whatever it is they're doing behind, then I would always work with them for a little while to understand that first. So not unlike a relationship that you've been in for quite a while, you can become quite addicted to where you are because of the familiarity, and the road less travelled can be quite daunting, but it could be better for you. That challenge could be something that would change so many other things in your life as well. Perhaps you need to be in the city and you were previously working in the area that you're from, so you weren't outside your comfort zone. And then if you have to go to the city, well, you have to negotiate city traffic and you have to be very early. So that might mean that you're not going to have the late nights that you've become used to having. And maybe you thought that you were getting very fond of Vino Calypso, but maybe it's not that you're nearly an addict, Merlo and me on the couch every night. Maybe it is just that you're quite bored. And so when you tease it out and unpick it and unpack it, you don't necessarily need to give anybody any advice. They kind of change their thinking themselves very gently. And I think that's the magic in terms of working with people to see whether or not it's the right time to change direction. When they can work out their why, their how gets easier.
But then you've got the practicality of it as well, where the bills need to be paid and the mortgage needs to be paid, and
I agree, but that's a different question, though, Donal. That's part of unpacking the bigger picture. So you weigh all of that up. That's your internal EBITDA again as a person or within your family. So these are the bills. This is what it costs for us to live. This is what I'm earning. If I make this change, I'm going to have to retrain for this period of time. It will cost this much money. This is what I won't be here to do. Like you had the lovely story of you and Leanne going camping last week, and Leanne had to go ahead with the kids and put up the tent. Okay. So
I was pouring foundations for her brother.
Pouring foundations. But here's the thing. So, it was for her brother, not yours.
Yeah, it's my brother-in-law
I
who's
understand.
building his wonderful extension. He likes to put the
coal in. Now, that's actually a horse of a different colour. I didn't get that from the interview. So that actually makes a big difference. That would speak to, because I know there was a bit of a joke then about, people might be watching you arriving in late and saying, what was the story about?
Yeah, so she had gone down. So I went on the Friday to help Phil to pour the foundations for his extension, which meant that Leanne had to go to the campsite with the 4 girls, and she took the lead on pitching the tent, setting it all up. And it's an 8-person tent for the 6 of us, and lots of good stuff to set up. But she's incredibly determined and independent. And actually, she has... a lot of strength in so many ways, but something like that would not faze her at all. Yeah. Actually, she'd quite enjoy the fact that I'd arrived and the hard work is done.
I know. You love her so much, Donal. It's so evident, and I love that. You look like you slept with a coat hanger in your mouth every time you speak about her, which is gorgeous. But the story as it was told, I didn't necessarily know it was Leanne's brother. That makes a slight difference, because you know how they were having a little joke with you saying, oh yeah, I'm sure your neighbours down there were saying, look at you arriving late. And
everything is done.
Yeah, but it was her brother. Now that does make a slight difference. If it had been your brother, it mightn't have been quite as easy for Leanne to go ahead and set up camp with the kids. But the point being that, when we do things in life and we do them from our own self-motivation, I think we can execute faster and easier So she will have seen her own skill and talent going to get a chance to shine in that space. And you rocking up later was going to be nearly, kind of a feather in her cap.
Yeah, absolutely. She'll agree with that and love that. I think that's a lovely place to leave it. I'm just so grateful to you for coming in and sharing your story. For anybody that wants to follow your work, where can they find you?
So I'm actually working with a couple of guys from Derry to build a website at long last. I've never built a website. I've never needed to. I haven't needed to look for business. I'm blessed. The work comes. So at the moment I'm on LinkedIn. There will be a website fairly soon. I'm on Instagram. The show has a page on Facebook, Instagram and TikTok, which I don't have any of. But again, things I'd like to do, I've never done, but I'd like to have. I will. I'll go there eventually. But the show has pages there. And in terms of my work, I'm contactable. My email address, so if you put in my name, my page on the psychotherapy website comes up. So details are there to email me for appointments as a psychotherapist. I also work with companies, so all of that's available. DMing really is how it has happened at this stage. It'll all be happening through website in a more slick and clean and smart way, I believe, fairly soon, any day now. I
Brilliant.
think.
Well, we'll add your Instagram and your email to the notes on Spotify and on YouTube. And yeah, thanks again for coming in. And yeah, we'll see you all next time.
Gur céad mai go Donal.
No, Habray.